Well, cell phone-based applications, or
Cell phone coverage maps would be good stuff.
developing apps, that kind of thing.
You want to develop your own application.
Yeah.
There's an open source currently that is most probably free of charge on the network.
Okay.
With that one, obviously there will be a minimum payment that you pay, but it's more contextualized in such a way that your own problem, your own solution, you do them the way you understand them. And then it's currently the one which is basically utilized. People are pushing for an open source kind of a thing because it's the way forward. Even the most promising organizations these days, they go for open source now. So I think you should better start from there. We don't have to come up with something which is more rigid and structured and given to us like that. No. Especially when coming to software.
Just a comment on that. I mean, what Sandy is busy doing with cell phone apps and so on. What the angle that we're actually trying to take is, instead of developing apps, which can be expensive and you have to update them regularly and so on, is we're rather making our websites cell phone and iPad and tablet friendly. So the most recent website we've done, the Biodiversity Advisor, which will be relaunching soon, will actually scale, so it will shrink and expand depending on what kind of screen it's on. So that's a different way to go.
That's interesting.
Just one comment to that. There's a huge advantage of apps. Apps will work offline. Websites only work online. So as soon as you have a 100% coverage, you can use that approach everywhere. But when you have an app, you can use it anywhere, even if you don't have cell phone coverage.
And it also addresses this issue of urban versus rural, because mostly people there are certain areas in South Africa, even now, they cannot have access to, they've got cell phones, but the connection there is absolutely not at all. So that's why it has got to be done in that way. So I think somehow it's cheaper. And that's why we've got the Ethernet from the Tsilikwa Hospital here in KwaZulu-Natal, which is getting connected to all the hospitals.
Thank you. One last question, Richard.
Yeah, it's the same point about the benefit of cell phones being offline, but certainly from a number of the wildlife investigators at the moment, people have worked on an application with one cell phone manufacturer so that people will be able to do incident reporting and crime scene taking photographs in the field and send it straight from a cell phone, but if they don't necessarily have the link, they can do that later. So it's a way to also help standardize the information that people are collecting. So the real, I think, potential advantages, but again, that would be going a targeted app route.
The Department of Forensic in Pretoria, for instance, they've also acquired one of the technologies that they're using for forensic purposes, because they've realized that in jurisdictions, when they are cross-questioned, sometimes the evidence that they bring through in their technology is not understood by judges and so on. So we have designed something that is more law-orientated for someone to say that this is more than enough to say this is what has happened to this instrument. So I think in that scenario, the forensic department in Pretoria, they've got more well-equipped technology they are using for identifying structures that have to do with law and so on.
Okay, thank you, Lucky. Very interesting topic, and thanks very much for keeping to time. I've just got a couple of housekeeping announcements. Please, would everyone submit their outcome sheet to the registration desk by the day end? Secondly, on the Isabella KZN Wildlife website, there will be pics and videos. It says please visit our Facebook page for updates, pics and videos on the symposium. Okay, and then if you can just ensure that all your delegates' details have been captured by us at registration. I don't know if it's meaning new people have come in, but if you haven't had all your details captured, please would you provide them. And also, if the speakers could please just give me short profiles of them. We'd like to have those so we can upload them to the website. Being sort of standing in for someone, I haven't collected those details. So please, if all the speakers, just give me a very short sort of resume of your profiles. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. So we actually a couple of minutes before time. Thanks very much for keeping to your time. I think we'll, if you don't mind, we'll just wait a minute and then we'll carry on. Well, in fact, it's a minute before. So I want to introduce Gavin Hough from Vision Solutions, and he's going to talk on vision systems for monitoring critical biodiversity areas.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Good morning, everyone. When you look at change, especially global change, people tend to average over huge areas. What's a degree between friends? If you think of a century and a degree, look at the signatures not in the world of global temperature, but in motion of components of that system. So what I want to look at is the role of vision systems. And by vision, we mustn't just think machine vision, we think situational awareness, we think things that are ticking away to tell you what's happening on the ground that you wouldn't normally notice. What you notice when you switch from an averaged measurement to dynamics is that you get all sorts of structures and systems. And what's so important, other than collecting pictures, is to build a simple procedure for making a difference. Here, what these guys do is they see where these structures touch the surface, and they make a little V where they're pointing, and they move along, and they make another V, and the V slowly gets narrower, and they slowly work out where this thing is going to hit landfall. So you need a very simple action plan. And that's what I think a conference like this, Symposium, you want to think about what you're going to get out of it, and what you can do to make things happen. Clearly, if you know where something is, every dollar that goes into working out where that thing is, on average saves $6, $7, $8 in terms of weather forecasting. That's an easy macroeconomic spend. And clearly, when you hit this kind of environment, evacuation and what you do quickly is relevant. Now, coming down to the oceans, I would look at motion with a view to looking at living systems, but I want to start off with Mother Nature. So there's several projects where we've looked at change through time. 70% of the fires in some areas are started by lightning. You want to know where these things are happening before the fire starts, or you want to know what the trends are very, very early in the piece. So I just want to touch on a little narrative here. Environmental Affairs sent people to Antarctic, where we were lucky enough to look up at the sky with cameras, look at the ozone hole, look at southern lights. The work there, followed by pointing cameras down over the landscape and looking at motion. I'll touch on why that's relevant. What I want to do now is speak to the experts who understand natural systems, rivers, estuaries, currents, and of course we want to see what happens to life forms. And I haven't got time to go into all of this, but I'll shoot through to a couple of cameos with shark and whale signatures, and then I'll finish off with this concept of what can you do just as one of the tools, one of the many tools in the toolbox in terms of wide area surveillance. Strengths and weaknesses. I've shown you some dramatic trends and events. I now want to focus on the subtle, the really subtle things. Here you have one of the largest wind farms, and this staggered me. This is out at sea, gentle breeze, nothing happens evidently at the wind turbine, but look, suddenly you precipitate fog formation downwind. So something spinning generates a vortex that seeds something that essentially spans 100% ground cover, in this case ocean cover. This is dramatic. Small trigger condition. Here you have a small plume wafting up. Look what that plume does. Instead of cloud seeding, it does the opposite when you get to a cloud deck. So, dramatic visual signatures to subtle phenomena. This is steam condensing. Now the idea is, I would like a continuous vigil on certain things that are key indicators of what you want to know about. And the first thing you do, you notice if you make something too short, it drops its E. Now, time must be explicit, okay? If you want to overview time, believe me, the most boring channel you can ever imagine is just looking at something 24/7. It's absolutely mindless. What you want to do is make time explicit. So suddenly, if you're looking at waves, the distance between two waves is 2 blocks. Each block is 5 seconds, 10 seconds between waves. You can measure time explicitly. You'll see patterns. Looking at position, you can, in this case, look at sunrise from Durban, looking out to the rising sun offshore. Through time, these waves propagate towards the coast. Ships enter harbors, you get a sense of narrative. Now, we want to monitor what is happening to things, and just to make it clear how important it is that you know where things are. If you look up, there's a lot of sky. If you're in the Antarctic, you're on a glacier that's moving very slowly. If you lock onto the star field, suddenly every pixel in every pretty picture becomes a known location. Now you're suddenly talking about where things are through time. Your fisheye distorts. You might see something interesting here. You want to cover the whole sky and you don't have distortion. So you use Volkswagen hubcap to try and undistort things. You want to know where things are like a bird's eye view. So now we've moved from looking up to looking at motion. Literally, what can something do? It can move up and down. Okay. Here, we generate a 1 in 50-year storm. Okay. This environment will take rival structures and subject them to a storm. To measure motion, the simplest thing, and now this is 10 times more accurate than other methods, it just moves up and down instead of having a specific probe. And I'm trying to look at natural systems, so I hope you follow where I'm going. That is a very low-cost investment, 4 pieces of foamolite in the water. And what you'll get out of that is motion through time. So here's your reference. Floats are bobbing up and down. Okay? You can see through time, you measure the height of the wave, the period of the wave, the direction of the wave. All right. Why am I showing all of this? It's got to be accurate. You have to trust it. And you have to run it 24/7, cost effectively. Why would you do this? Why would you have a whole center looking at motion? What's happening here is these man-made structures, vessels, they've got 6 degrees of freedom. You want to measure all 6 degrees of freedom. Roll, pitch, yaw, heave, surge, sway. You want to use low-cost cameras. I'm trying to take this outdoors now, you'll see. And you want to see what design outperforms any other and what structure suffers the least damage in a storm and shelters the vessel in this case. Why present that at a conservation symposium? Why turn squiggles into surge, sway, heave in this case? I'll tell you why. Okay, what we're now trying to do is give a bit of credibility to a pretty picture looking offshore. This is one pilot project where you look out to sea, and if you look at the O in Hilton, there's actually a dorsal fin just appearing. My point is, real surveillance is having a wide area covered and seeing small, subtle events and leaving a trace. Cannot miss. This is the dorsal fin that pops up. Okay, now I saw Ken walked in here. We were doing some work a long time ago on tracking whale blows. And there are lots of interesting things one can do in the marine environment, and I'll bring it back to shore in a minute. You start off with your high school geography. You have a camera. You look out to sea, you know how high up you are, and you want to obviously know where the horizon is. If you start doing that, and you do a little bit of geography, you'll then, GIS, geometry, come up with another little cross. And you can say, hey, through time, these waves are propagating to the coast and they're reflecting back out. What's interesting is you'll never see this if you just look at those waves. You don't notice explicit reflection events, anything like as clearly. So now you're seeing changes too slow or subtle to the human eye. This was work done with UCT. Here's a dangerous event where there's a rip. Okay? What happens here? Look at a scene, very simple scene. There are two things you do. You look at onshore, an offshore, and a longshore motion. Take a pair of scissors, cut out a small piece of coastline, pick it up, and put it here, where you've got your blue line. Next frame comes, do the same thing. You're shunting pixels, take a pair of scissors, cut out a little piece of the picture, and put it next to it. So through time, you suddenly see that, go back to standard 8, in this amount of time, the raft of bubbles behind the waves have drifted along the shore. So that is time, and that's distance. The slope of the triangle is the opposite of the base. The speed of the longshore drift is being measured. Now because, thank you, water doesn't like being squeezed. If you go up here, this piece of coastline, it's not moving. So what's happening? It's moving here, it's moving there, it's got to shoot out to sea somewhere, and that's what's happening. This dangerous rip. Big waves are breaking further out. The green line samples action coming towards the coast. The blue line samples action along the coast. Okay. Now, what I'm trying to say is that visually, you see so much more when you've got a real video time stack, real visuals through time. Because now you can put axes and you can measure distances, and you'll see that when the big waves come, they break further out to sea, which is no surprise. But what is a surprise for me, who doesn't know much about it, is suddenly the current almost doubles along the shore when the larger waves start breaking. So you see patterns like that. Okay? Here's that dorsal fin I was talking about behind the text. Now, this is, everyone is talking about POT these days, but it's pixels on target. Okay? And how many pixels on target? If you've got 3 pixels and you are sampling live video, you will get a rich, obvious signature that you cannot miss. And the sad thing is Murphy usually applies in the game of monitoring, surveillance. Thank you, 5 minutes. What happens is you look down, shark appears, you look up, it's gone. That's Murphy, and Murphy's alive and well. If you've got this simple signature, you look up and say, hey, I missed something. It leaves a trace. So that's what we're using in many different environments. Here are a couple of sharks. Well, they told me there was one shark. You scan it, you see there's a second shark beneath the surface. So what you're doing now, there's the boat, there's the dorsal fin. You can start looking at these signatures. How many are there? How big are they? How fast are they swimming? So let's go back. Excuse the L. What's happening is the tail is leaving a signature. Dorsal fin's obvious, it breaks the surface. And then the people who understand the environment say, listen, that's the species, that's the distance, I'll tell you the length of that shark. You know from the slope how fast it's swimming, it flicks its tail, you can track it. And it is subtle. There is no obvious signature, for this second shark. We're not even using polarizing filters, we're not using anything special. So the proposal is to use the right stuff at the right angle and you get a whole lot more action. I want to now shoot through to a whale environment, looking out to sea. Okay. Your live video feed, and suddenly you get these little signatures when whales start surfacing. So, you know, rather than waiting for hours on end, I can scan this and look at 4 hours in one image. And you can see every piece of action in 4 hours, click on it, and see the offending clip. Like that wanted dead or alive mugshot. Okay? You can see the dimensions, you can see the durations, and the interesting thing is when you speak to people who know what's going on, a whole process starts. So if I look at, in this case it's just 1 hour video, and I see what on earth is that, and I take my mouse and I click on this, you'll now get an event, and this is a whale breaching, and you'll see the red crosses on the portion of the image that generated the transit signature. It's a nice tool, don't waste time. Okay. And finishing off, the kinds of things that happen. This was Marine Coastal Management funded work with Ken. You'll see, long way out to sea, in so much time, a pod of whales propagated, and you get this subtle signature in the distance, on the horizon almost. And then they disappear, and they're underwater, and they actually swim faster underwater. So now you're finally looking at living systems and you've got some methodologies. And what you want to do, and this is work we did a couple of months ago, is we switched to high definition cameras. 2 minutes, no problem. I didn't have a shark at the time, okay? But what I want to show you is the incredible ability to track these fairly small targets. An argument, of course, is if this was a 24/7 vigil, you'd have lots of action. Here is your time. Here are 5 surfers catching the same wave. 1, 2, 3, 4, all dropping in, 5, and then they break out of the wave. So you can see them bobbing in the water, catching their waves. I can measure how far, how fast, how long each surf ride was. Each dorsal fin appearing, each boat. So you've got a whole lot of attributes that people can use. Okay. So I think I'm going to stop for questions because clearly it's one of the tools in the toolbox. Sharks don't do this as far as I can see. They don't appear on the surface and behave, especially bull sharks. And Reunion and I were hoping to see what we can do with white sandy seabeds and polarization filters. I'll finish off with these slides where just you see the double side, all these waves slowly coming in, slowly slowing down as they break and dissipate energy. Okay? And then one man's noise, another man's music. You move away from the waves to various targets, and you can see I want to track something beneath the surface. I'm going to have action on the surface. I'll get reflections. So you need to write some fairly careful software to pull out what you want. We're after attacks. And I'll just finish off with this. Note the difference. You see this little pattern here? This guy was paddling like hell. I can see every time he put his hand in the water. When you look at that video, HD wide field, you don't even notice the surfer. So this can analyze just a few pixels in target and give you the story, the narrative. They're the waves, they're the surfers. This is the swash recently up the coast. As the sand dries through time, you'll see it drains back. Okay, so these are waves breaking on the beach. You'll see they correlate with waves breaking further out on a reef. The events are coupled beautifully. Okay, and this is just to explain it. There's a rock, there's a wave. When the wave is wet, you can see what's happening. So you can work out what wave inundation events are dominating what parts of the coast. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gavin, for a very interesting talk. It's amazing what the technology can do. We've got plenty of time for questions. Any questions? Brendan?
Is there a possibility to maybe, we've got quite a lot of fire towers with cameras and stuff to, I'm thinking from the law enforcement side, looking at, observing movement of people through